This project is inspired by artists who use quilts as part of their art making process, specifically the artist Faith Ringgold. Now, our project is not going to look exactly like her art because it is our own, but we are going to consider the quilt as a style and motif. We're going to need a 6-inch square piece of paper. You could go with a larger piece as long as it is square and measured in inches. So that way you can do 1-inch squares for your quilt pattern. 6 inches is a manageable size though. So we want to divide this 6-inch square into smaller squares to make our quilt design. We could use a ruler and measure out 1-inch increments, and this is a great way to practice that. If we do not want to use a ruler, or if we're making a kit to send home, we could use a 1-inch piece of paper or cardstock and just trace it. It's a little bit less accurate, but it won't be noticeable. So you could do it that way as well. And to do that, you just line up the piece with the edge and then start making your lines. Now you have your gridded paper. You should have 36 squares, so you can figure that out by counting them. So you could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and keep going, or you could do a little multiplication. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that will give you 36 squares. Once you have those, you want to start adding your patterns. So in our examples, you will see that it is a pattern that goes pattern square, solid square, pattern square, solid square, pattern square, solid square, like a checkerboard. And that means you would come up with 18 different patterns. You want 18 completely different patterns, and if possible, 18 different colors if you have that many color markers. Now, keep in mind that you're also going to be putting some collaged fabric on top, and that's obviously going to cover a lot of the middle squares. So maybe do your most creative or most interesting patterns along the outer edge, and then save your maybe less interesting or least favorite colors for the middle squares. I'm going to be using permanent markers to make my patterns because I feel like they look a little bit nicer and the color is a little bit more saturated. But if you do not have permanent markers, any markers or colored pencils or anything like that is totally fine. The smaller tips make it a little easier to make detailed patterns, but other than that, any color is fine. And I'm also not going to use pencil. I'm going directly with the marker to save time because otherwise you have to go over all those pencil marks. After quite a while, you should have all of your patterns and solid colors completed. And now you are ready to add fabric collage. And the previous examples, we did houses. And so we're going to do a house today. But if you wanted to do a different theme, you don't have to do houses. Houses work really well if you're going to do a big display that's about like maybe a neighborhood or something like that. So, or neighbors, houses work great for that, but if you want to do a different theme, feel free. Each project doesn't need very much fabric, so this is a great project for using up scraps from other things or donated fabric. So you have just some scraps that you have gathered, and these are enough for several projects, but you want to look through and decide, which patterns, which colors go together, what are you going to use. You can use felt, you can just use patterned fabric, upholstery fabric. You want something that's easy to cut for students and that doesn't fray too badly or get like these little gushy things. Now, some fabrics are patterned on one side and white on the other. You can use that to your advantage. For example, in this one, the white of this window is actually the back side of a piece of fabric that was white on one side with color on the other. So you can use that however you like. Start building your collage, thinking about the basic shapes and what is going to be the main color of your building. The first shape you're going to want to cut out is probably a square or a rectangle. So take your fabric and your scissors, and then you want your fabric to be pretty much flat. And fabric that has a pattern on it like this is great because you can use that pattern to help you cut the square. You don't want to glue anything down right away. Arrange all your pieces first. If you need to get a triangular shape for the roof, the best way to do that is to take your piece that's a rectangle or a square, fold it in half, and then cut from the folded corner to the not folded corner. And that is going to give you the perfectly centered triangle for your roof of your house. So once you have an idea of where all your pieces are going to go, you can start to glue them down. And I'm going to start with the pieces that go on top of the square of the house so that the window and the door and all of those things stay down. And this piece of fabric is being a little finicky because it's curling up. So hopefully once we start gluing things down, it will stop curling so much. And I'm going to put the glue on the messy mat, not on my paper here, because I don't want it to soak through in a spot that I might not want it to be. So I'm going to start with my door. And with fabric, you just have to really press it down and be patient because you want that to stick. So now I'm going to put just part of the chimney attached to the top of this building because I know it tucks behind. If I see any kind of loose strings, like I see a lot of loose strings here, I can trim them off before I glue them down. I know I want this piece of shrubbery to be behind the building, so I'm going to start with that. And it's just going to be tucked kind of behind here, so I'm going to lift up the corner and position it and then glue it down. And now I'm going to flip this over and put glue all on the back. Be very careful not to drip this. I'm going to turn it back over again and put it down where I want it to be permanently. Okay, and then press. I think I'm even going to add a little bit of fencing here just to finish this off. There is the finished quilt-inspired project using a house as the theme.